Hello everyone, good evening. Warm welcome to Regulatory Bodies YouTube channel by Testbook. My name is Madhav Sir. I welcome you all in the next session. So before we start the discussion, may I have a reply in the comment section that I'm audible, visible, everything is fine, we are good to go, so that we can begin the discussion without any further delay. I know the annual report was not completed and some of the chapters were still pending. So what I have decided is first we will be covering the annual report, and on 27th of September we will be coming up with a discussion related to the annual report, and that discussion will be with the help of MCQs. So obviously it's going to be a two-way preparation for you. First you will understand the concepts, and moving on you will be able to understand the questions which are going to come in the examination, and you will be in a position to answer those questions as well. Okay ji? So before we start, can I have a reply in the comment section that everything is good? Those who are live, just give me yes sir, so that I can get to know those who all are live in the class, so that we can begin. If you haven't watched the part 1 of this session, then I would request you do watch the part 1 of this session, which has been already conducted, and you can easily find it on our YouTube channel itself. So do watch it, otherwise some of the things you may miss. But अगर आपने पहले वाला सेशन अटेंड नहीं किया, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है you cannot be with me today in this session live. You can be with me in this session live as well, because the previous session has nothing to do with the current one, and I'll give you a quick glimpse what we have done in the previous session. So let's get started, guys. If you want to download the PDF of this particular session will be available on my Telegram channel. My handle is @MadhavArora. Channel name is Economics by Madhav Arora. So we started with the annual report, and in the previous session we have discussed about assessment and prospects, where we have discussed the assessment and prospects. Along with that, I have covered the real economy as well as the price situation in the country. So these two areas were discussed in the previous session only, and today we will be starting from Indian economy or economic review in terms of money and credit, financial market, government finances, external sector. Then we'll move on to part 2, where we'll discuss the working and operations of Reserve Bank of India. We'll start with monetary policy operations, then we'll talk about the credit delivery and financial inclusion. These are the targets for the current session. ठीक है, ये सारा वो पार्ट है जो हम ऑलरेडी पिछले क्लास में कर चुके हैं. If you haven't done it with me, you can watch it again. The video is available on our Telegram channel, on our YouTube channel, so nothing to worry. Even पिछले क्लास में अगर आपको याद हो, so we have discussed few MCQs also for the data, for the content which we have covered in the previous session. So that was an holistic session which helped us to cover 1, 2, 3 and 4, I would say the 4 units of your report. Today we will be covering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 units of this particular report, and then we will be moving to part 3, which will be organized on Sunday, and we will complete this report by Sunday itself. ठीक है जी? So let's get started. So the first point is money and credit. So we are talking about the economic review. We are talking about how the nation looks as per the RBI Annual Report 2024-25. If I give you the overall picture, the monetary and credit conditions, they have matched RBI's monetary policy stance. That means RBI has managed its monetary policy stance in order to achieve the set targets, and the monetary as well as the credit situations, they are going in sync with the RBI's monetary policy stance. There is a term which is known as reserve money. Reserve money has slowed down because it kept fewer deposits with RBI. So what is it? So reserve money is basically the base money issued by RBI, which include cash as well as the banker deposit with RBI. But we have witnessed that there was liquidity crisis in the banking sector, because of which the banks, they have kept fewer deposit with RBI, due to which the reserve money has decreased. Second point is currency in circulation. So currency in circulation has witnessed a faster growth. On the other side, the 2000 rupee note has been withdrawn from the economy and its effect has been faded. No one is worried about 2000 rupee notes. We are very easily doing our day-to-day transactions even without the circulation of 2000 rupees note as well. Bank credit has witnessed a growth, and this growth was witnessed in double digits. Gap between the deposit growth and credit growth has narrowed. That means if I talk about the deposit growth and the credit growth, the difference between their growth levels has decreased now, or I would say the wedge has reduced. So that is somehow which you need to remember. So this is the overall picture of money and credit. Now let's discuss it one by one in much detail. So the first point we have is reserve money. If we talk about the trends with respect to the same, RBI's balance sheet size has shrank to 22.8% of GDP from 23.5%, which means earlier the RBI's balance sheet was 23.5% of the GDP of the country, but now it has shrinked down to 22.8% of GDP. Very important data. Reserve money growth has adjusted, and the reserve money growth is 5.8%, down from 6.7%. The reason is, we all know that in the last year RBI has reduced the CRR from 4.5% to 4%, and if RBI has reduced the CRR, then it's quite obvious bank funds which are parked with RBI in the form of cash, that parked fund will decrease, and due to the decrease in that parked fund, the reserve money growth has decreased in comparison to the previous financial year, because reserve money include the bank's deposits with RBI. Temporary slump in August 2024 due to incremental CRR base effect was witnessed. Then if I talk about the CIC share, that is cash in circulation. CIC basically it's cash in circulation. Cash in circulation is 26.9% of reserve money, which has witnessed a growth of 5.8%. अगर आप देखेंगे आपको लगेगा कि सर इतना सारा डेटा, how I'm going to learn, how this data can be memorized, then my answer is, अगर आप इस रिपोर्ट को खोल के देखेंगे ना तो उसमें बहुत सारा डेटा, आई हैव वर्कड रियली वेरी हार्ड फॉर यू, जिसमें मैं सिर्फ वो डेटा आपके लिए निकाल कर लाया हूं जो आपके एग्जामिनेशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से इंपॉर्टेंट है. तो जो डेटा मैं मार्क कर रहा हूं, प्लीज ट्राई टू रिमेंबर इट. Direct question can be expected from the same. Moving ahead, bankers deposit with RBI is 20.8% of reserve money, which has fell down 6.5% due to the CRR cut by 50 basis point, as I already discussed. Currency GDP ratio fell further because of more digital payments and CBDC usage. That means currency in circulation with respect to GDP, this ratio has decreased. Why this ratio has decreased? Because of our increase in dependency on, I would say, digital payments rather than depending upon the cash. So obviously the cash circulation or the cash with respect to GDP has decreased, and this percentage or this ratio has fallen down. Okay, I have a question in the comment section. It says that temporary slump in August due to incremental CRR base effect. So what is this incremental CRR base effect? Anyone? Any idea about this? Anyone? Any idea about this? Have you heard about this incremental CRR base? If you know, if you don't know, then I would like to inform you that this point has been discussed in my finance current affairs sessions, but still I'll help you to understand. Incremental cash reserve ratio, the RBI temporarily imposed the incremental cash reserve ratio of 10% on the increase in banks' net demand and time liability, and it was introduced from May to July 2023. So this, I would say this move was basically aimed at absorbing the surplus liquidity that has arisen because of the withdrawal of 2000 rupees note and government spending. So this incremental CRR was temporary and it was discontinued in September 2023. Now the point is, सर बेस इफेक्ट वाला पार्ट पे अगर हम बात करें, सो व्हेन वी कंपेयर द ग्रोथ रेट, वी कंपेयर द ग्रोथ रेट विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द ईयर ऑन ईयर बेसिस. सो इन August 2023, incremental CRR artificially suppressed liquidity and credit condition. So the base of the last year, that is 2023-24, was, I would say, usually distorted. So there was a temporary slump in August 2024 when looking at the data for 2024, the year-on-year growth in credit, deposit or liquidity appears to slow down. Why it appears to slow down? Because it has been compared with respect to the incremental CRR, which was a temporary phase in the previous financial year, that is 2024-24, that's 2023-24. So the temporary slump in the August 2024 was due to the incremental CRR, base effect in the financial year 2023-24. तो यहां पर आपने CRR को इंक्रीज किया, अब उसके कंपैरिजन में इस साल आपको लगा कि जो ग्रोथ है दैट इज नॉट एप्रोप्रिएट बिकॉज ऑफ द इंक्रीज इन द बेस वैल्यू. अगर आप बेस वैल्यू को बढ़ा देंगे तो ऑटोमेटिकली जो कंपैरिजन है दैट विल लुक लाइक दैट द इंक्रीज इज नॉट एप्रोप्रिएट. सो दैट हैज बीन डिस्कस्ड इन दिस पॉइंट. क्लियर हो गया जी? इज दिस पॉइंट क्लियर? शैल आई मूव अहेड? Okay. Next point is retail digital payments has increased 17.9% in value and 35% in volume in the financial year 2024-25. If I talk about the sources of reserve money, then the net foreign assets has increased by 2.8 lakh crore rupees. Gold share in the net foreign asset increased to 12% thanks to the price gain. So this is very important. What does it say? If we talk about the net foreign assets, if this question is asked that, sir, how you define this term, that is the net foreign asset, and why they are thanking to the gold price, or in short ki sir puri story bata do kya hai. So please listen this story, try to understand this point. See, when we use this word net foreign asset, when we use this term, that is reserve money, जैसे कि मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया, it is the high powered money which is created by RBI. It consists of currency in circulation, banker deposit with RBI, and along with that there is a term we call it as other RBI liability. So the main sources are net foreign assets and net domestic assets. So net foreign assets, they are the RBI's holding of foreign currency assets, gold as well as SDRs minus the foreign liability. So in simple terms, net foreign asset reflects how much forex wealth like US treasuries, dollars, euro, gold, the RBI holds. So if the net foreign asset increases, it means the RBI has accumulated more forex reserves, and 2.8 lakh crore rise basically means RBI bought forex inflows from FDI, FPI, remittances, or gained from revaluation. Revaluation means depreciation of rupees or appreciation of gold price. So here it says that the net foreign asset, it has increased by 2.8 lakh crore rupees, and the gold share in our net foreign asset has increased from 8.3 to 12% because of the not increase in volume of gold but rather the increase in price of gold. This change has been witnessed. RBI net credit to government increased due to open market operation purchases of government securities. ये point काफी important. If you remember, in December 2024, when there was a banking liquidity crisis, उस समय RBI ने open market operation को run किया, where RBI purchased the government securities from the public, or RBI purchased the government security from the institutes in order to increase the circulation of currency in the market. अब इससे क्या हुआ कि जो पहले government securities were in the hands of the public, like you and me, were in the hands of the institutes, they have been purchased by RBI. So technically, now RBI is holding those government securities. That means technically the loan given by RBI to the government has increased because of increase in government security holdings by RBI. Because of increase in government security holdings by RBI. ठीक है जी, clear हो गया ये point? समझ आया? The next point talks about money supply. When we talk about RBI measures the money supply with the help of M3, which means currency with public plus demand deposits of the public in the banks as well as term deposits of the public with the banks. So when they are added, we get a term of M3. So if I talk about the trends, M3 has witnessed a growth of 9.6%, but last year this growth was 11.2%. M3 divided by GDP, this ratio has remained almost the same as last year. The data is not important, just remember that the ratio has remained the same. But on the other side, the ratio of cash to GDP has decreased because of our increase in dependency on digital payments rather than depending upon the cash flows, or rather than depending upon making the cash related transaction. So this point is again important. I hope this is clear to you. Got it, guys? No more doubt. Shall I move ahead? Keep on replying right side by side so that I can have a understanding कि जो मैं बता रहा हूं that is clear to you. Okay, moving on to the next point. If we talk about the sources of M3, bank credit to commercial sector has increased, which led to the 11.8% growth. Net bank credit to government increased by 11.2%, and net foreign assets of the bank also increased in line with RBI's net foreign asset. अब बैंक की net foreign asset का मतलब जब बैंक के पास जो foreign asset है इन कंपैरिजन टू बैंक्स लाइबिलिटी, जब इन दोनों को डिफरेंशिएट किया जाता है, इन दोनों को सब्ट्रैक्ट किया जाता है, वी गेट द वैल्यू ऑफ नेट फॉरेन असेट्स ऑफ द बैंक्स एज वेल. If I talk about the ratios, currency to deposit ratio fell to 15.4%, very important. Reserve to deposit ratio also fell down. Both money multiplier increased to 5.7, and velocity of money, that is GDP by M3, has remained stable. So this is something which you need to understand, which you need to remember. Money multiplier आप सबको पता है? Are you aware of the term money multiplier? Say yes or no. No, I'll let you know. So whenever this question is asked कि sir money multiplier का असल में क्या मतलब है, how we define it, so my answer to this particular question would be money multiplier is basically M3 divided by reserve money. It is basically M3 divided by reserve money. It measures how many times broad money, that is M3, is generated from 1 unit of base money, that is reserve money. 1 unit of base money, that is reserve money. So it has increased to 5.7 from 5.4, which indicates that banks, they are using reserve money more efficiently to create deposit or credit. Factors will be lower cash deposit ratio, higher credit deposit ratio, stable cash reserve ratio, and whatnot. So for each 1 rupee of reserve money, now बैंक इज जनरेटिंग 5.7 रुपीज ऑफ M3. अब आप सोच रहे होंगे कि 1 से 5.7 कैसे बनाया. देखो उसका आंसर एक बड़ा सिंपल है. अब इसको ऐसे इमेजिन करो कि इंडिया में मान लो सिर्फ एक ही बैंक है और सिर्फ 100% क्या है, कैश, 100% बैंक ट्रांजेक्शंस है, देयर आर नो कैश फ्लोज. अब मेरे पास 100 रुपए है, दिस इज द रिजर्व मनी, आई हैव डिपॉजिटेड दिस 100 रुपीज विद द बैंक. बैंक ने इस डिपॉजिट में से मान लो 20% का रिजर्व रखा, 20 रुपए, और बाकी के 80 रुपए किसको दे दिए, लोन पे. अब ये जो 80 रुपीज बैंक ने लोन पे दिए, दे विल अगेन come back to the bank as a deposit only, because bank is not giving in the form of cash. So reserve will be 16, left out rupees will be 64, left out will be 64. Now this left out 64 rupees will again turn into deposit, out of which 20%, that is 12.8 ही होगा ना. 12.8 will be kept as reserve and rest will be again given as loan. तो अगर आप देखेंगे तो एक्चुअली जो 100 रुपए का डिपॉजिट था, इट विल लुक प्रीटी हाई. एक्चुअली जो लोन आप 80 का दे रहे थे, दैट विल बी प्रीटी हाई. दिस इज बिकॉज ऑफ द मनी मल्टीप्लायर फैक्टर. अब यहां पर तो मैंने क्या किया, I have taken 100% digital economy, cash flow is zero. Let's suppose if the cash flow is 50%, तो अगर 100 रुपए रिजर्व मनी है तो उसमें से जो डिपॉजिट होगा that will be 50 only. So on that, with respect to 50, we will make these calculation and we will compare it with respect to 100, that is the reserve money. समझ आई बात? क्लियर हो गया? Is it fine? Is it fine? ठीक है. If it is clear, just give me yes sir. M3 जिसको नहीं पता मैं बता दूं, M3 is a tool to measure the money supply in the economy, which include currency with public plus public deposits with the bank, which include demand deposit as well as term deposit with the public. Simple. Moving on to the next point. अगला जो point है हमारे पास, that is velocity of money. Velocity of money is basically nominal GDP. It's not real GDP. It's nominal GDP divided by M3. So if I talk about nominal GDP divided by M3, it measures how quickly money circulates in the economy. If it is stable, it implies that even though M3 expanded, money usage in transaction related to GDP did not change, suggests that there is a steady demand for money and there is no unusual surge in the circulation speed. So these are the, I would say, understandings from the given data. Clear? Moving on to the next point. Now the next point talks about the overall credit growth of the economy. Very important. तो अगर हम overall credit growth की बात करें, so overall we have witnessed a double digit credit growth, but in case of banks, public sector banks, they have grown faster in comparison to private banks. So the private banks credit has grown slower in comparison to the public sector banks. Public sector banks, they still hold the largest share of the total credit. So public sector बैंक के पास total share का, total credit का largest share है, और public sector बैंक का जो credit growth है, that has been greater than the private banks. अब यहाँ पर एक point जो मैं आपके साथ share करना चाहूँगा, which is really very important, that is related to these growth rates. So first of all, guys, the moment we understand these growth rates, we have to understand one thing very carefully. ये जो growth rates हैं, which we are talking, the growth rates which we are talking, in these growth rates, one thing is very important कि ये जो growth है, that is with respect to what? So that is with respect to credit, and it is being discussed with respect to a particular sector. Particular sector means agriculture sector है या industrial sector है, या फिर in our discussion we have the other sectors as well. तो first of all, अगर मैं 2023-24 डेटा की बात करूं तो 2023-24 में जो क्रेडिट ग्रोथ थी, that was highest in which sector? So that was highest in services sector, which was 20.8%. Then after 20.8%, this growth was second highest in case of agriculture and allied activities, which was 20%. Then after that we have personal loans. In case of personal loan, this growth was 17.6%, and finally it was industrial sector where the growth rate was 8%. ठीक है जी, तो ये 2023-24 का ट्रेंड था. अब 2024-25 के लिए आरबीआई ने अपनी रिपोर्ट में कोई ट्रेंड एज इट इज नहीं दिया, बल्कि उन्होंने क्या किया, अगर आप रिपोर्ट खोल के देखेंगे तो टेबल दे दिया. उस टेबल में उन्होंने मंथ वाइज जो ग्रोथ रेट है वो बताई. अब अगर मैं एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर की बात करूं तो एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर का जो ग्रोथ था अप्रैल में, दैट वाज 15.3%, बट इट स्लोड डाउन टू 12%. दैट इज द रीजन आई हैव मेंशन दिस कि एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर का जो क्रेडिट ग्रोथ है, दैट स्लोड शार्पली फ्रॉम 15.3% टू ओनली 12%, or rather I would say 19.8%. 1 second. It should be 19.8% to 10.4%. इसी वजह से यहाँ पे ये पॉइंट्स लिखे हैं. तो ये अप्रैल का डेटा, अप्रैल 2024, और ये मार्च का डेटा, मार्च 2025. लेकिन ये डेटा आपको याद नहीं रखना, आपको इसका ट्रेंड याद रखना. एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर में इट स्लोड डाउन. उसके बाद अगर हम बात करें इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर की, तो इन केस ऑफ इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर इट हैज विटनेस अ ग्रोथ, एंड दिस ग्रोथ वाज pretty stable. 6.8% growth से बढ़कर it has increased to 8%. In case of service sector, in service sector we have lost the momentum which has hit because of the NBFCs. So यहाँ पे 19.5% का growth था, which has slowed down to 13.4% in the last month. In case of personal loans, we have witnessed a growth of 17% in the April 2025 which has also slowed down to 14%. लेकिन अगर आप टेक्निकली देखेंगे तो सब में से ओवरऑल लास्ट मंथ तक जो ग्रोथ सबसे ज्यादा रही वो किस में रही? सर दैट वाज इन पर्सनल लोन्स. पर्सनल लोन के बाद वी हैव सर्विस सेक्टर, देन वी हैव एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर, देन वी हैव द इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर एज पर द last month data. But if I talk about the overall average, in case of overall average, you can take it in this manner कि around 15% के आसपास एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर में ग्रोथ रहा, इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर में दिस ग्रोथ वाज अराउंड 7%, 7 to 7.5%, सर्विसेज सेक्टर में इट वाज अराउंड 16%, and in case of personal loan it was around 16.5%. तो ये काफी क्लोज थे. सो डेटाज, एग्जैक्ट डेटाज पूरे ईयर के आरबीआई ने भी प्रेजेंट नहीं किए. वी विल आल्सो नॉट गेट इनटू इट. आरबीआई ने कहा एग्रीकल्चर में ग्रोथ रेट स्लो डाउन हुआ. ओके सर. मीडियम इंडस्ट्रीज और मेटल इंजीनियरिंग में स्ट्रॉन्ग ड्राइवर्स थे. लार्ज इंडस्ट्रीज एंड इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में ग्रोथ रेट वीक था. सर्विस सेक्टर ने लॉस किया अपना मोमेंटम, और पर्सनल लोन में वी हैव विटनेस ऑलमोस्ट द सेम टाइप ऑफ ग्रोथ फ्रॉम 17 to 14%. और इनमें से भी सबसे ज्यादा जो स्ट्रांगली ग्रो हुआ है इन केस ऑफ पर्सनल लोन्स दैट इज योर हाउसिंग लोन. इन केस ऑफ पर्सनल लोन सबसे तेजी से या सबसे स्ट्रांगली जो ग्रो हुआ है दैट इज हाउसिंग लोन. ओवरऑल मैं कहूं तो क्लियर ब्रॉड बेस्ड डिक्लेरेशन, दो some sectors like medium industry, housing, they remain resilient. तो ओवरऑल अगर हम देखें तो ओवरऑल तो आपका स्लो डाउन है इन टर्म्स ऑफ सेक्टर वाइज ग्रोथ रेट, बट स्टिल सम सेक्टर्स लाइक मीडियम इंडस्ट्री एंड हाउसिंग दे हैव रिमेन्ड रेजिलियंट, दे हैव रिमेन्ड ऑलमोस्ट सेम एज द अर्लियर डेटास, एज द अर्लियर क्राइटेरियाज. मूविंग ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. अगला पॉइंट कहता है डिपॉजिट टू क्रेडिट रेशियो. सो डिपॉजिट ग्रोथ हुआ, लेकिन जो क्रेडिट ग्रोथ हुआ वो डिपॉजिट ग्रोथ से ज्यादा हुआ, और डिपॉजिट ग्रोथ हमेशा ज्यादा रहता है इन कंपैरिजन टू क्रेडिट ग्रोथ. लेकिन इनके बीच का ये जो डिफरेंस था ग्रोथ का, वो ग्रोथ रेट्स का जो डिफरेंस है दैट हैज स्क्वीड डाउन, दैट हैज डिक्रीज्ड. सो टू फिल द गैप बैंक्स दे हैव इशूड मोर सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ डिपॉजिट. सो ये जो गैप था दिस हैज नैरोड, और इस गैप को फिल करने के लिए बैंक हैज issued more certificate of deposit. What is this certificate of deposit? Guys, certificate of deposit का मतलब है when a financial instrument is issued against your deposits, certifying your deposit with a bank, and that certificate of deposit can be used as a collateral to borrow the funds. तो आपने क्या किया, आपके पास एक एफडी थी, उस एफडी के बदले में एक डिपॉजिट था, उस डिपॉजिट के बदले में you got a certificate of deposit, and against this certificate of deposit you are borrowing the funds. So what you are doing is from your deposits you are generating the credit. From your deposit you are generating the credit, जिसकी वजह से डिपॉजिट ग्रोथ भी बढ़ा और उसके साथ साथ क्रेडिट ग्रोथ और तेजी से बढ़ा, और इस गैप को फिल करने के लिए बैंक ने काफी ज्यादा वैल्यूज में सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ डिपॉजिट्स को इशू किया है. दैट इज समथिंग व्हिच यू नीड टू रिमेंबर. सो नाउ लेट्स कंक्लूड दिस. बैंक डिपॉजिट्स एंड क्रेडिट they both have grown strongly in double digit. Deposit growth still trailed credit growth, but gap smaller. तो अभी भी डिपॉजिट ग्रोथ ज्यादा थी क्रेडिट ग्रोथ से. डिपॉजिट ग्रोथ ओवरऑल अगर हम बात करें डिपॉजिट ग्रोथ और क्रेडिट ग्रोथ में जो डिफरेंस था वो कम हुआ है, और यहाँ पर जो गैप है वो कम हुआ है. सो यहाँ पर अगर मैं कहूँ कि ये आपका सॉरी आई गिव यू अ रॉन्ग एक्सप्लेनेशन, 1 सेकेंड. ये कुछ ऐसा था, मैंने बनाया तो सही था. मैं ये कहना चाह रहा हूँ कि अगर बैंक का ये क्रेडिट ग्रोथ है, लेकिन बैंक का और क्रेडिट ग्रोथ और डिपॉजिट ग्रोथ के बीच में जो गैप है वो पहले के मुकाबले क्या हुआ है, कम हुआ है. दिस गैप हैज डिक्रीज. तो ये जो ग्रोथ रेट है ये किसका है, डिपॉजिट्स का, ये किसका, क्रेडिट का. और इस ग्रोथ रेट को बढ़ाने के पीछे एक बहुत बड़ा हाथ है किसका, सर आपके सर्टिफिकेट डिपॉजिट का, क्योंकि जो पैसा डिपॉजिट में आया उसी के बदले में आपने सर्टिफिकेट डिपॉजिट इशू कर दी, जिसकी वजह से यू आर प्रोवाइडिंग द लोन, बिकॉज ऑफ विच क्रेडिट ग्रोथ हैज इंक्रीज्ड. ठीक है जी. क्रेडिट ग्रोथ ब्रॉड बेस्ड कहां बढ़ा, रिटेल, सर्विसेज, एग्रीकल्चर में. करेंसी डिमांड हैज ग्रोन मॉडरेटली, मोर प्रेफरेंस फॉर द डिजिटल पेमेंट्स. तो आपकी जो करेंसी डिमांड है वो बड़ी है इकोनॉमी में, लेकिन अभी भी वी आर स्टिल demanding more for the digital payments. Now let's move on to the next topic of the chapter 2, that is financial market. That what is the status of global financial market as well as the Indian financial market. So world markets were unstable due to uncertainty about when the central bank will normalize the monetary policy, sticky service inflation, ongoing geopolitical tension, geoeconomic fragmentations, and in order to add this, in current financial year, we have the tariff war as well. So many central banks, they have changed their policy directions. Some kept raising the interest rate. That means some of the central banks, they have kept on tightening their monetary policy because the inflation was very high in those countries. Other, they stopped increasing the interest rate, or they started cutting down the interest rate as the inflation has cooled down in the country. So I would say India will fall in the second category, where India has or RBI has cut down its repo rates because inflation has cooled down in the month of February 2025. Next point is Indian financial market. Despite of global instability, India's market has witnessed a stable and a strong posture. So if I talk about the money market is a place where short-term borrowing is done. Lending market for banks and institutions, I hope you all are very well aware, money market is a place where short-term borrowing is done, and this market is regulated by RBI. Majority borrowing and lending is done by the institutes, and especially by the financial institutes like banks, NBFCs. Call money market is one of the biggest example which fall under the category of money market. ठीक है जी. अगर हम बात करें rates, they remain stable, aligning, and liquidity, cash availability in the system was also aligned. Banks issued more certificate of deposit, short-term fixed deposits by bank to raise money. So bank has issued the certificate of deposit, and against the certificate of deposit bank has raised the funds. तो जो deposit आया, deposit के बदले में certificate of deposit issue किया और उसकी मदद से credit या उसकी मदद से पैसा borrow किया. That is something which has been mentioned. Weighted average call rate. Weighted average call rate का मतलब the interest rate at which banks they borrow from each other overnight, and the main target for the monetary policy, on the basis of which monetary policy decide what should be the repo rate, mostly stayed close to the repo rate. That is the rate at which RBI provides loan to the banks. Clear हुई ये बात? तो ये जो आपका weighted average call rate है, that has remained pretty close to repo rate, which shows that yes, RBI's repo rate are in line with the weighted average call rate of the money market. Commercial papers, their issuance has also increased. On the other side, if I talk about the government securities, long-term bonds, they have been issued by the government. Long-term bonds, they have been issued by the government. Yield, that is interest rates on bond, fell down because India's bond got included in global bond indices. So foreign investors, they bought more. तो हुआ क्या कि सर अगर हम yield की बात करें तो yield क्या होता है, अगर आपको पता हो, yield is basically the return which you are receiving against the bond price, not against the face value. मान लो मैंने आपको एक government security दी, the face value of the government security is 10,000 and the rate of interest is 10% per annum, which means the return is 1,000 rupees per year. This bond is available, or this bond has been purchased at a price of 9,000. So if it has been purchased at a price of 9,000, what will be the yield? So that will be 1,000 rupees of return with respect to 1,000 rupees of return with respect to 9,000 rupees of your investment. So if you solve this, what you will get? So you will get 10 divided by, or 100 divided by 9. So 100 divided by 9 is basically 11.1%. So 11.1% is the yield. So whenever bond prices decreases, yield increases. Whenever bond prices increases, yield decrease. So here yield, that is the interest rate on bonds, fell down. Why it fell down? Because the government security demand increased. Due to increase in demand in government securities, price of government security increased, because of which yield decreased. And why this demand has increased? Because Indian bonds, they have been included in the global bond indices, and now foreign investors, they have bought more of the Indian government securities, because of which demand increased, price increased, and the yield fell down. Clear हुआ? समझ आया? इसमें कोई confusion तो नहीं है? Bond price का जो relation है with respect to yield is inversely proportional. Whenever the bond price increases, yield decreases. That is something which you need to remember. अगला पॉइंट है, अगर हम गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटीज के लिए बात करते हैं, क्रूड ऑयल प्राइसेस रिड्यूस द इन्फ्लेशन रिस्क, आरबीआई बिगिन cutting the rates. So these all factors led to the more and more issue of government securities, as well as they have led to the decrease in yield on the government security. So 10-year government security yield has dropped from around 7% to 6.45% because of increase in bond price in the market. समझ आ गया? अरे बोलो, समझ आ भी रहा है? जाग रहे हो? Do reply in the comment section. If you haven't hit the like button, quickly hit the like button, guys. And if you haven't shared the session, do share it with your friends and give me yes sir अगर यहाँ तक ये bond price वाला concept clear है तो. Moving to the next, that is corporate bonds, which talks about the funds which are borrowed by the companies. Their yield also fell down following the government bonds, but the spread difference between the corporate bond yield and government bond yield widened because company earnings slowed. So issuance, fundraising by companies rose sharply. ये 3 points है जो आपको याद रखने हैं. सबसे पहला सर जो गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड्स है उनका yield डिक्रीज हुआ, कॉर्पोरेट बॉन्ड्स का भी जो yield है वो डिक्रीज हुआ, लेकिन इन दोनों के बीच का जो डिफरेंस है, इन दोनों के बीच का जो डिफरेंस है, वी कॉल इट एज स्प्रेड. We call it as spread. This difference has increased. Why this difference has increased? The reason is bond price has decreased. It's okay. Corporate bond price has increased. It's okay. Yield on both of them decreased. It's okay. But the yield decrease on corporate bond was higher in comparison to government securities because of this happened. Along with that, not only this, corporate bonds, they have issued huge volume of these corporate bonds in order to corporates, they have issued the huge volume of corporate bonds in order to raise funds from the market, because of which again this fundraising by the company has led down to increase in the spread value, but the spread widened because the company's earnings, they have slowed down. Got it? Clear? Moving to the next. Equity market, stock market hit new highs in the first half of the year. Equity market में second half of the year में they fell due to foreign investors selling. So पहले half में अगर हम first half of 2024-25 की बात करें, there was a jump that Indian equity market has touched the new heights, but eventually in second half of the year, FPI outflows led to the fall in the equity market. Weak domestic growth and corporate earnings has also weakened. Global uncertainties due to US tariff, geopolitical tensions and whatnot, they have resulted in decrease in trust of the investors in the Indian equity market. FPI outflow increased, and due to increase in this FPI outflow, the overall equity market has fell down in the second half in comparison to the first half. So Sensex rose 5.1% by March 2025. जबकि अगर हम फर्स्ट हाफ में देखें तो दिस ग्रोथ वाज प्रीटी हाई, बट इवेंचुअली इफ आई टॉक अबाउट द एंटायर फाइनेंशियल ईयर इट वाज ओनली 5.1%. मूविंग ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, फॉरेन एक्सचेंज, दैट इज INR वर्सेस US dollar. Rupee was mostly stable in the first half, but it weakened in second half due to strong US dollar and FPI outflows. Overall, rupee depreciated 2.4%, ending at, this value is not important. So overall, in the financial year, we have witnessed that Indian rupee has depreciated by 2.4%. So if I conclude, global market was unstable, still reacting to the high inflation and geopolitics. Indian economy or Indian financial market was relatively stable. Short-term money market aligned with RBI policy. Government bonds yield fell. Corporate bond market deepened because of more and more issuance of the corporate bonds. Equity market saw high but corrected later, and rupee weakened slightly. Around 2.4% of depreciation was witnessed of Indian rupees with respect to the US dollars. Got it, guys? So this was the third part. Now moving on to the, this was the fourth part. Now moving on to the fifth part of this section. If I talk about the fifth part of this particular chapter 2, it talks about the government finance. If I talk about the government finance, both central as well as the state government, they are working on their fiscal consolidation. That means reducing budget, deficit as well as debt. Tax collection have been strong, giving the government more room to spend on capital expenditure. The focus in 2025 and 2025-26 is on boosting investment in growth-oriented projects while keeping the overall borrowing under control. So this is the overall picture of government finance. Now let's check out the technicalities which are important. First of all, I will be sharing the budget 2024-25 revised estimates, and then I will be sharing the estimates for the current financial year 2025-26 as well. Gross fiscal deficit 4.7% of GDP, slightly better because in the budget the target was 4.9% at the time of budget presentation. Now it has been revised and it has been decreased to 4.7%. Basically fiscal deficit का मतलब क्या है? So fiscal deficit basically means borrowing, और अगर आपका fiscal deficit कम हो रहा है that means your borrowing has decreased. So how it has achieved? So it has been achieved by spending less देन प्लान्ड, बोथ रेवेन्यू एंड कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर. जो आपने प्लान किया था उससे कम आपने स्पेंड किया, जिसकी वजह से आपका जो डेफिसिट है वो उतना नहीं बढ़ा जितना आपने एस्टिमेट किया था. तो क्या ये सही है? आई वुड से सर इट इज नॉट appropriate. Why it is not appropriate? If you have spent less, especially in case of capital expenditure, as per your estimates, that is not a good call for an economy like India, where we are relying on infrastructure development and growth. In case of revenue expenditure, interest payments and subsidies fell slightly as percentage of GDP. Food subsidy was lower than expected. It has helped us to save 7,830 crore rupees. Along with that, pension and retirement benefits increased. Grant to states, they have fell from 1.8 to 1.6% of GDP, because of which the overall revenue expenditure as per the estimate has decreased, but on the year-on-year basis it has increased by 5.8%. तो ये जो 5.8% है, that is because of the previous year estimate, but budget के हिसाब से अगर हम देखें तो रिवाइज एस्टिमेट के अकॉर्डिंग जो प्रोजेक्टेड बजट था उसमें आपका जो रेवेन्यू एक्सपेंडिचर है दैट इज डिक्रीज. कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर वाज लोअर देन द टारगेट वाज 3.1% ऑफ जीडीपी, 3.1% ऑफ जीडीपी वर्सेस 3.2% ऑफ द लास्ट ईयर. तो यहाँ पे जो आपका कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर है दैट इज ऑल्सो डिक्रीज, बट इसे डिक्रीज नहीं करना चाहिए था गवर्नमेंट को. दैट इज द बैकबोन ऑफ द इंडियन इकोनॉमी. टैक्स रेवेन्यू बेटर देन एक्सपेक्टेड. It was 11.6% of the GDP. Income tax and GST collection strong. Custom duty slowed down, but excise duty improved. तो यहाँ से अगर हमसे कोई पूछे income tax GST collection increase हुआ है, overall जो tax revenue है that has increased to 11.6% of GDP, but custom duty slow down हुई है in comparison to the excise duty which has improved. Non-tax revenue they have increased sharply. And why they have increased sharply? So that is mainly because of the surplus which has been transferred by RBI to the government, because government is the owner of RBI. So RBI ने अपने profits को, अपने surplus को government को जब transfer किया, it led to the increase in non-tax revenue of the government. Can you give me the answer in the comment section? What value of surplus has been transferred by RBI to the government of India? For financial year 2024-25, any idea? ये फिगर मैं आपको पहले करवा चुका हूं. That is the reason I'm asking this. If I give you a rough estimate, sir, it is 2.69 lakh crore rupees. So this is the surplus value which has been transferred by RBI, to the government. This is the surplus which has been transferred by RBI to the government, and it is, I would say, the record surplus till date which has been transferred by RBI to the government of India. Moving on to the next point. In case of gross fiscal deficit target for the current financial year 2025-26, these are the budget estimates. So it's a quick revision of the budget. So the gross fiscal deficit target is 4.4%. Revenue expenditure will fall slightly to 11% of GDP because of interest payment set to increase. Fertilizer and petroleum subsidy budgeted to fall. Food subsidy will rise. Pension slightly decline. Grants to states significant increase. तो ये कुछ reasons हैं जिसकी वजह से overall revenue expenditure will decrease. Capital expenditure budgeted to grow by 10.1%. and it stays at 3.1% of the GDP. ये क्या सर, एक तरफ आप कह रहे हो budgeted to grow by 10.1% as per the year-on-year basis, but if I compare with the current GDP, it is 3.1%. तो सर पहले भी तो 3.1 ही था, लेकिन अब GDP बढ़ गई ना. अगर GDP बढ़ गई तो 3.1% of GDP की वैल्यू ज्यादा होगी, और in comparison to the previous year they have witnessed a growth of 10.1%. States will also get 1.5 lakh crore interest-free loan for 50 years to boost expenditure. Effective capital expenditure is 4.3% of GDP, which is better than the last year. Effective capital expenditure मतलब जो government ने capital expenditure की है for the asset development, for the infrastructure development, along with that include the grants which are the part of revenue expenditure, but these grants are given by the government for infrastructure growth. They will also be the part of effective capital expenditure, which is 4.3%. तो अगर आप देखें 3.1 to 4.3%, ये जो extra increase है 1.2% का, that is just because of the grants given by the government to the state governments under the revenue expenditure title, but it is boosting the infrastructure of the economy, so it has been included under the category of effective capital expenditure. अगला पॉइंट है टैक्स बॉयंसी. टैक्स बॉयंसी का मतलब है ग्रॉस टैक्स रेवेन्यू expected to grow faster than GDP, which means if your GDP increases, which means more demand, more consumption, more demand means more income, more consumption means more expenditure. That means your tax revenue or your tax payments will increase. So whenever GDP increases, tax revenue increases, and tax buoyancy means tax revenue increases faster than the GDP. So direct tax buoyancy is 1.2 times. Indirect tax buoyancy is 0.8. Total tax to GDP is 12%, which is highest since 2007 to 2008. अगर हम पिछले साल की बात करें, in the revised estimates for the financial year 2025-26, tax to GDP ratio was 11.6%, but this year it is 12%, which is highest, and tax buoyancy is positive, or I would say increasing, in case of direct tax, but in case of indirect tax, अगर GDP 10 बढ़ी है तो indirect tax सिर्फ 8 बढ़ेगा, लेकिन अगर GDP 10 बढ़ी है तो direct tax revenue जो है वो 12 increase होगा. Is this point clear? समझ आया यहाँ तक? टैक्स buoyancy वाला पॉइंट क्लियर है? मैं ये कहना चाह रहा हूँ, मान लो आपकी GDP 100 है और 100 से बढ़कर वो हो गई let's say 120, और यहाँ पर अगर आपका टैक्स रेवेन्यू x है और वो इंक्रीज होके हो गया y, तो यहाँ पर अगर आप देखेंगे दी चेंज और दी इंक्रीज ग्रोथ टैक्स में कितना है, सो दैट इज x y माइनस x, और जो ग्रोथ है आपके जीडीपी में वो कितना है 120 माइनस 100. तो इन दोनों को जब कंपेयर किया गया तो ये समझ आया कि जो टैक्स ग्रोथ है y माइनस x इन केस ऑफ डायरेक्ट टैक्स, इट इज 1.5 टाइम्स द इंक्रीज ऑफ जीडीपी. अगर जीडीपी मान लो कि 20% हमारे एग्जांपल में इंक्रीज हुई है तो 1.2% या 1.2 टाइम्स ऑफ 20% इंक्रीज होगा क्या आपका टैक्स रेवेन्यू इन कंपैरिजन टू द प्रीवियस फाइनेंशियल ईयर. ठीक है जी, क्लियर हो गया पॉइंट? कैन आई हैव अ रिप्लाई प्लीज? सुमेधा, शिवम, पूजा, अजय, अपू, शेजल, डू रिप्लाई. क्लियर है ना? थैंक यू ऋतिक. चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. अगला पॉइंट क्या कहता है? मार्केट बोरोइंग्स स्लाइटली लोअर एज परसेंटेज ऑफ जीडीपी स्टिल रिमेन द मेन सोर्स ऑफ फंडिंग डेफिसिट. तो अभी भी जो मेन सोर्स है आपका डेफिसिट को फंड करने का, दैट इज योर बोरोइंग, बट इट इज लेस इन कंपैरिजन टू द प्रीवियस ईयर एज अ परसेंटेज ऑफ जीडीपी. स्टेट फाइनेंस की बात करें तो बजटेड ग्रॉस फिस्कल डेफिसिट है 3.2% ऑफ द जीडीपी. एक्चुअल की अगर हम बात करें, हायर डेफिसिट्स 64.2% of the budget estimate already used worse than the last year. So till February 2025, 64.2% of the budget estimate was already used, which was worse than the last year, which means कि जो आपका gross fiscal deficit है, it may increase. Actual data or the complete data was not given in the report. Revenue slowed down due to weaker state GST collection and lower central grants. अब ये और स्लो हो जाएगा क्योंकि अब GST को कम करके 5 और 18% कर दिया. The 12% and 28% figures have been removed. So this will also again hamper the revenue of the states. Then expenditure, revenue spending of the states has increased. Capital spending fell in comparison to the last year data. If I talk about the budget estimates for the 2025-26, so these are the revised estimate. So this is the budget estimate. So the budget estimate state combined gross fiscal deficit is 3.3%. Transfer to state will rise 12.5% under the central sponsored scheme and special assistance. Capital support scheme raised to 1.5 lakh crores in comparison to the lower value data in the last year. गवर्नमेंट, जनरल गवर्नमेंट फाइनेंसेस और सेंट्रल प्लस स्टेट कंबाइंड अगर मैं बात करूं तो टोटल सेंटर और स्टेट का जो ग्रॉस फिस्कल डेफिसिट है दैट इज 7.6% ऑफ द जीडीपी इन फाइनेंशियल ईयर 2024-25 व्हिच इज लोअर देन द प्रीवियस फाइनेंशियल ईयर व्हिच वाज 8.8%. डेट टू जीडीपी रेशियो ऑफ सेंटर एंड स्टेट is 81.9%, almost as same as of the previous years. Revenue, tax revenue increased to 18.8% of GDP, that is total tax revenue by center and state. Expenditure fell slightly to 30% of the GDP. Capital expenditure ratio is still strong, that is 5.9% of the GDP. So this is very, very, very important data, which is a combined data for 2023-24 for central as well as the state governments. As per IMF outlook, India's debt to GDP ratio is expected to decline, unlike the other emerging economies. Overall government balance to improve steadily. So there is lot of data in this report, mainly in growth present. ठीक है, अगर आप ध्यान से देखेंगे ऋतिक, मैंने ना जिन डेटास को मार्क किया, द वे आई एम मार्किंग ओवर हेयर, या फिर अगर मैंने राउंड किया होगा कहीं ना कहीं, तो जो मैंने डेटा उसको राउंड किया वो इंपॉर्टेंट है. मैंने बजट रिलेटेड डेटा उसको मार्क नहीं किया, रीजन कि ये एनुअल रिपोर्ट का डेटा ही नहीं है. दिस इज द डेटा ऑफ द बजट और ये आपको बजट के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में पढ़ना ही पढ़ना. तो उस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से ये सारा इंपॉर्टेंट है. मेरी रिपोर्ट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से जो शायद आपको बजट डॉक्यूमेंट में ना मिले वो ये वाला पार्ट है जो मैंने मार्क कर दिया. ये आपको यहाँ से पढ़ना है, बाकी सारा डेटा आपको बजट से पढ़ना ही पढ़ना. उसमें मेरे हाथ में कोई कंट्रोल नहीं है. बाकी जो पूरी रिपोर्ट है उसमें मैं जो भी डेटा आपके पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से इंपॉर्टेंट है मैं उसे राउंड कर दूंगा या स्क्वायर कर दूंगा सो दैट यू कैन मेमोराइज इट. डन? ठीक है ऋतिक, शैल आई मूव अहेड? चलो कंक्लूड करें. सो गवर्नमेंट इज बैलेंसिंग फिस्कल डिसिप्लिन विद ग्रोथ पुश, lowering subsidy and controlling revenue expenditure, raising capital expenditure to improve long-term growth capacity. States are being supported with higher transfers and special loans. Overall, India is moving towards stronger fiscal health. ठीक है जी? So these are some of the points which you need to remember. ये overall status है आपके गवर्नमेंट के फाइनेंस का, what you have to remember. Now moving on to the next segment of chapter 2, part 1, chapter 2, that is external sector. कि भैया external sector की क्या हालत है? We will be talking about import, export, current account deficit, capital account surplus, वो सारी बातें करेंगे. पहले मैं अगर ओवरऑल पिक्चर आपको बता दूं तो ओवरऑल पिक्चर क्या कहती है? इंडिया का जो एक्सटर्नल सेक्टर है दैट इज रिमेन रेजिलिएंट डिस्पाइट ऑफ द जियोपॉलिटिकल टेंशंस, ट्रेड अनसर्टेनिटी एंड व्हाट नॉट. Merchandise exports they have recovered slightly, but imports they have increased faster, which has widened the trade deficit. Service exports and remittances stayed strong, contained current account deficit within stable level. तो यहाँ पे क्या आया पॉइंट? पहली चीज कि सर जो आपका मर्केंडाइज एक्सपोर्ट है वो इंक्रीज हुआ है, बट खुश होने की जरूरत नहीं है क्योंकि मर्केंडाइज इंपोर्ट जो है वो बहुत ज्यादा इंक्रीज हुआ है. बट डोंट वरी, योर सर्विस एक्सपोर्ट इज ग्रेटर देन सर्विस इंपोर्ट, विच मीन्स योर सर्विस सेक्टर इज नेट पॉजिटिव, नेट सरप्लस है. और ये जो नेट सरप्लस आपका सर्विस सेक्टर है, इट हैज सपोर्टेड द करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट, जिसकी वजह से करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट इज इन अ सस्टेनेबल लेवल. वो सस्टेनेबल लेवल कितना है? आई विल गिविंग यू द परसेंटेजेस इन सम टाइम टू गो. नेट कैपिटल इनफ्लोज दे हैव फेल शॉर्ट ऑफ करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट. फॉरेक्स रिजर्व्स declined on a balance of payment basis. So net capital inflows they have fell short. Net capital inflows they have fell short of current account deficit. अगर आपका net capital inflow कम है, current account deficit ज़्यादा है, तो इसका मतलब आपको एक्स्ट्रा पैसा चाहिए. That extra fund will come from the forex reserve, because of which the forex reserve will decline, and this decline has been witnessed from April to December 2024. Clear हो गया point? Next. The next point talks about the data's global economic conditions. Global growth slowed down to 3.3%, which is projected to 2.8% 2025. Advanced economies, they have grown 1.8%. Emerging economies, they have grown 4.3%. Both the points are important. World trade volume rebound, that has increased 3.8%, which was 1% increase last year. Emerging economies, they have received $255 billion of portfolio inflows. It is not India alone, it is the emerging economies as a whole. They have received an inflow of $255.7 billion. अब बात आती है डेटा की. डेटा देखना, एक्सपोर्ट्स, merchandise export has increased slightly by 0.1%, which is led by electronic sector. Only the names, percentages are not important. Electronic sector, engineering goods, pharma, rice. On the other side, it is dragged down because of the high imports of petroleum, or I would say the petroleum exports has decreased, as well as gems and jewelry exports has decreased. Next point is imports. सर आप खुश हो रहे हो कि एक्सपोर्ट्स बढ़े हैं, गुड, बट एक्सपोर्ट बढ़ा सिर्फ 0.1%, लेकिन इंपोर्ट बढ़ गया 6.2%. ये बढ़ गया 6.2% बिकॉज ऑफ गोल्ड import has increased, electronic goods import has increased. Then we have what is this POL? What is this POL? Any idea? ये बड़ी बार यूज किया जाता है और मैं जब भी कभी इस टर्म को देखता हूँ सोचता हूँ कि पता नहीं स्टूडेंट्स को ये टर्म पता भी है या नहीं. It is petroleum, oil and lubricants. It is petroleum, oil and lubricants. For them, the imports have increased. This is something which you need to remember. तो आपको समझ आ गया होगा क्या याद करना है क्या नहीं. Is it clear, Ritik? मैंने मार्क कर दिया. If I talk about merchandise trade deficit, and we know that whenever we talk about trade deficit, we talk about only and only merchandise goods. So it has widened. ये widen क्यों हुआ? Sir, it has increased because of the increase in imports, जहाँ पे imports have increased very high in comparison to what, sir? In comparison to your exports. सबसे बड़ा जो dent है total trade deficit में 43% of deficit is because of oil alone. Deficit widened with China, Russia, UAE. Surplus improved with US, Netherlands and UK. तो अगर आप बात करें डेफिसिट वाइडन हुआ विद चाइना, रशिया, यूएई बिकॉज वी आर इंपोर्टिंग फ्रॉम देम. सरप्लस हुआ बिकॉज वी आर एक्सपोर्टिंग टू यूएस, नीदरलैंड एंड यूके. इसको आप इग्नोर भी कर सकते हैं क्योंकि इसमें से जो चीज याद रखने वाली है आई विल बी गिविंग यू इन सम टाइम. नाउ वी हैव द इनविजिबल ट्रेड, दैट मीन्स वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द सर्विसेज, वी टॉक अबाउट द रेमिटेंसेस as well as we talk about the income, that is profit and wages as well as salary. Net service exports are $135 billion. Very important, very important. इंडिया का जो net services है that is surplus. India's net services are surplus $135.5 billion, जहां पे आपका ट्रेड डेफिसिट था $282.8 बिलियन. तो ऑलमोस्ट आधा जो आपका ट्रेड डेफिसिट है दैट हैज बीन कंपनसेटेड अलोन विद द सर्विसेज surplus only, and strong IT and business services has supported the Indian economy. Then next support is coming from remittances, which is $137.7 billion. India is on the first rank, as India is on the first rank. India receives highest remittance in the world, not only in 2024, same was in 2023, same was in 2022, same was in 2021 in terms of ranking, but the value has increased from over $82 billion to $137 billion post-COVID. So you just remember this data. Those are 24 में, it is $137 billion and India is on the first rank. In terms of outward remittance, US is on the first rank. सबसे ज़्यादा outward flow है remittance का US से, सबसे ज़्यादा inward flow है remittance का इंडिया में. Primary income outflow, अगर आप primary income की बात करें, it is majorly outflowing rather than inflowing, जिसमें dividend और interest payment majority है. And this value is $37.3 billion. So this is again negative. So current account deficit कैसे calculate करेंगे? So we will first take the trade deficit, then export surplus, services surplus plus remittances plus और माइनस प्राइमरी इनकम आउटफ्लो। तो जब आप इसे कैलकुलेट करेंगे, योर करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट विल कम आउट अराउंड $37.1 बिलियन, विच इज 1.3% ऑफ जीडीपी। और करंट अगर मैं बात करूं फॉर द करंट क्वार्टर 1 April to June 2025-26, it is 0.2% of GDP. सिर्फ एक क्वार्टर का फॉर द करंट फाइनेंशियल ईयर इट इज 0.2% ऑफ जीडीपी, लेकिन लास्ट पूरे फाइनेंशियल ईयर का इट वाज 1.3% ऑफ जीडीपी, विच इज अगेन गुड। Overall, be Ritik, US is on the top. Overall, be US is on the top. If I say global level पे largest outward remitting country US, largest inward remittance receiving country, that is India. Clear? Okay. Now let's talk about the external financing and capital inflow. So net capital inflow moderated, but it was insufficient to cover the current account deficit, because of which अगर करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट अभी भी आपके कैपिटल अकाउंट सरप्लस से बड़ा है, सो इन दैट पर्टिकुलर केस अनडाउटेडली आपका जो डेंट है वो किस पे आएगा, दैट विल कम ऑन द फॉरेक्स रिजर्व्स, एंड ड्यू टू विच फॉरेक्स रिजर्व्स हैज फेल डाउन $13.8 बिलियन इन अप्रैल टू दिसंबर 2024। ठीक, नेक्स्ट एफडीआई ग्रॉस इनफ्लो, वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट डेटा। ग्रॉस इनफ्लो एफडीआई का है $81 बिलियन, बट नेट इनफ्लो इज ओनली $0.4 बिलियन। अब यहाँ पे जो वर्ड आता है नेट इनफ्लो, व्हाट इट दिस बेसिकली मीन? इट बेसिकली मीन्स एफडीआई इनफ्लोज minus FDI outflows, that means repatriation, which means the companies which are investing in India, they are disinvesting in India and taking their funds back. And last is outward foreign investment done by Indian companies. तो जो इंडियन कंपनीज ने इंडिया के बाहर इन्वेस्टमेंट की, फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट जो इंडिया से वापस गई, उसको जब मैंने माइनस किया मेरे ग्रॉस इनफ्लो से, इट हैज जस्ट गिवन मी अ वैल्यू ऑफ $0.4 बिलियन, जो कि पिछले साल $10.1 बिलियन था। मेजर इनफ्लोज सर्विसेज, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, एनर्जी, रिटेल, ट्रांसपोर्ट। सोर्सेस, एफडीआई का सबसे बड़ा सोर्स क्या है सर? एफडीआई का सबसे बड़ा सोर्स है सिंगापुर, मॉरिशस ऑन द फर्स्ट, देन सेकेंड, देन थर्ड एंड सो ऑन। यहाँ पे आपको एक चीज याद रखनी है, वो क्या? अगर आप नेट एफडीआई कैलकुलेट करेंगे तो पहले आप नेट इनवर्ड एफडीआई देखें तो ग्रॉस इनफ्लो कितना है? $81 बिलियन, उसमें से वापस कितना गया? $51.5 बिलियन। तो नेट इनवर्ड फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट कितना हुआ? $29.6 बिलियन। अब इंडियन कंपनी जो इंडिया के बाहर इन्वेस्टमेंट कर रहे हैं, दैट इज 29.2, तो हमारे पास आया था 29.6, बाहर चला गया 29.2, तो बचा कितना? $0.4 बिलियन इज द नेट एफडीआई एज पर द डेटा विच इज मेंशन्ड। ठीक है, सो इंडिया वाज प्लेस्ड 4th in terms of greenfield FDI capital investments which have been announced during 2024-25 after US, France and UK. According to UNCTAD, that is United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, India is emerging as a major source of global FDI, ranking among the top 20 sources countries in 2023. तो भैया India is not only the one of the largest recipient of foreign direct investment, now India is becoming one of the, or I would say top 20 source of foreign direct investment in the world as well. तो अब सिर्फ और सिर्फ हम inward ही नहीं ले रहे, we are giving or we are investing outside India as well, which is undoubtedly supporting or which is undoubtedly increasing the India's demand, or which is undoubtedly increasing the importance of India in the economy or in the world economy. ठीक है जी, क्लियर हो गया पॉइंट, समझ आ गया? नो मोर डाउट? ठीक है, मूविंग ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट। अगला पॉइंट है एफपीआई की। सर अगर हम एफपीआई की बात करें तो नेट इनफ्लोज वर ओनली $1.7 बिलियन, विच वॉज $41.6 बिलियन। अगर आप एफपीआई को एफडीआई से कंपेयर करेंगे, मान लिया इट इज ऑलमोस्ट 4 times, बट इट इज वेरी लेस इन कंपैरिजन टू द लास्ट ईयर डेटा. Debt inflow has increased especially in case of government securities. Equity has witnessed an outflow of $15.7 billion, obviously because of the risk in the economy. External commercial borrowing, that means India borrowing from the external parties, net inflow increased to $18.7 billion, which was only $3.6 billion. तो ये data important है. अगर आप देखें तो almost 6 times your external commercial borrowing has increased, which shows that it is easy to borrow from the external world. NRI deposit inflow has increased to $16.2 billion, which was $14.7 billion last year. One reason could be डेप्रिसिएशन ऑफ इंडियन करेंसी, जिससे ऑब्वियसली अगर $1 आज 100 रुपए का है, पहले 80 का था, तो मेरा $1 इंडिया के बैंक में 100 रुपए दिखेगा, विच इज बेटर फॉर मी, सो आई शुड गो फॉर डिपॉजिट्स इन द इंडिया. दैट इज अ पॉइंट. सो ये मैंने आपको पूरा कंपैरिजन का एक चार्ट दे दिया, पढ़ लेना. इसमें से डेटा वही याद करना जो मैंने आपको बताया, और उसमें भी अगर मैं यहाँ पे आपको मार्क करके दूं डेटा जो आपके लिए इंपॉर्टेंट है, रेमिटेंस इंपॉर्टेंट है, नेट सर्विसेज इंपॉर्टेंट है, ट्रेड डेफिसिट इंपॉर्टेंट है, वेरी 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 इंपॉर्टेंट करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट, देन एफडीआई नेट इनफ्लो, एफपीआई नेट इनफ्लो, ईसीबी एंड फॉरेक्स रिजर्व. सो फॉरेक्स रिजर्व अगर आप देखें तो पिछली बार $16 बिलियन इंक्रीज हुआ था, बट दिस टाइम करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट वाज ग्रेटर देन दी current capital account surplus, because of which the overall forex reserve has decreased by $13.8 billion. ठीक. अब अगर मैं कहूं कि इसका ओवरऑल क्या कहानी है, ओवरऑल कहानी है कि एक्सटर्नल रेजिलियंस एंकर्ड बाय सर्विस एक्सपोर्ट एंड रेमिटेंस, ट्रेड डेफिसिट प्रेशर अभी भी है इंडिया के ऊपर, एफडीआई रिमेन स्ट्रॉन्ग बट एफपीआई नेट एफडीआई वीक, reserves dipped modestly because of the current account deficit. India is managing external stability, structural strength in IT services as well as remittances. Risk is equals to trade deficit. Dependency on volatile FPIs and global uncertainties are the conditions of risk for the Indian economy. Now, if I talk about the vulnerabilities, external debt, अगर आप debt to जीडीपी रेशियो की बात करें, इंडिया का जो टोटल डेट टू जीडीपी रेशियो है दैट वाज अराउंड 81%. हमने अभी पढ़ा 81 ही था ना, 81.9%. लेकिन अगर मैं इसमें सिर्फ और सिर्फ एक्सटर्नल डेट की बात करूं, सो एक्सटर्नल डेट इज 19.1%, which is up slightly from 18.5% in comparison to the previous year. Short-term debt is 42.4% of the total external debt. Is it good? Short-term borrowing is good. एक तरफ आप कहोगे बिल्कुल सर अच्छा है, we are borrowing for short time. नहीं, it's not good. The reason is short-term borrowing is generally done for managing your working capital, and if you are managing your working capital, it is not going to result in asset addition, and if the asset is not adding on, so this loan is barely a liability on the economy which you are utilizing for making your day-to-day expenses. So that is the reason अगर आपका short term debt बढ़ता है, that is not very good sign for an economy. It should be checked by the economy for sure. Forex reserve, we have more than two times the short term external debt. We have more than 2 times the short-term external debt as a forex reserve. Our forex reserve is capable for 11 months of merchandise imports. Net capital inflows during the April to December 2024 moderated from a year ago and fell short of current account deficit, जिसकी वजह से balance of payment आपका कम हुआ है 13.8%. बता चुका था, दोबारा बता दिया so that you can remember this. This is important. Last year capital account was surplus 63, this year only 23. तो ये गैप तो ज़्यादा बड़ा नहीं हुआ, करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट तो ज़्यादा बड़ा नहीं हुआ, बट हाँ कैपिटल अकाउंट सरप्लस कम इंक्रीज हुआ है या पिछले बार से काफ़ी ड्रॉप डाउन हो गया, जिसकी वजह से फॉरेक्स रिजर्व जो पिछली बार बड़े थे, दिस टाइम दे हैव फॉलन डाउन. क्लियर हो गई बात, समझ आ गया. तो ये और ये 2 चैप्टर्स आपके कंप्लीट हो चुके हैं. इफ यू हैव एनी डाउट यू मे आस्क प्लीज, otherwise I'll move ahead. Shrishti, it was only part 1, so today is part 2 of your annual report. ठीक है जी, चलो. So I'll be right back in 2 minutes. Let me get some water for myself. Then we'll move ahead. By the time, if you have any doubt, you may write down in the comment section. I'm waiting. Okay. अब हम बात करेंगे पार्ट 2 वेयर वी विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट द वर्किंग एंड ऑपरेशंस ऑफ रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया. अब यहाँ पे डेटा ज़्यादा नहीं है. यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ आरबीआई हैज़ वर्कड विद द मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी ऑपरेशंस, credit delivery and financial inclusion, financial market and foreign exchange management, regulation and supervision. So we will be talking about the operations of RBI. So first I'll start with the monetary policy. So if I talk about the inflation and monetary policy, overall the picture is known to you. If you remember in 2024-25, in the first half of the financial year, inflation rates were pretty high, but then it started falling down. And there was a liquidity crisis in the banking sector, because of which in December, RBI announced cutting down the CRR into 2 tranches from 4.5% to 4%. पहले 4.25 किया, then it was decreased to 4%. And then in the second half of the financial year, RBI has also cut down the repo rate in February 2025. So repo rate was cut down by 25 basis point, and it was cut down in the month of February 2025. ठीक है जी. तो ये पॉइंट्स आपको ऑलरेडी पता है. इसमें जो चीज़ें आपका कुछ डेटा ओरिएंटेड एरिया है वो मैं आपको बताता हूँ. So headline CPI inflation trending down during the 2024-25, which was interrupted by the volatile food prices. October 2024, RBI shifted from withdrawal of accommodation to neutral stance. Neutral stance means either we will maintain the policy rates constant or we may decrease as per the requirement. In case of accommodative, we will keep on decreasing or increasing as per the requirement. So February 2025 policy rate cut 25 basis point to 6.25% with neutral stance maintained. CPI projection 4.8% for the financial year 2024-25, expected to moderate further in 4.2% in 2025-26. But अगर हम current scenario की बात करें, as of July 2025, India's CPI rates were 1.55%. GDP growth 6.4% for the financial year 2024-25, then projected 6.7% for 2025-26. But now, as per the current RBI projection, it is expected that Indian economy will grow by 6.5%. Liquidity management, it was surplus from July to November, deficit in December to February. So surplus again in the end of March. और RBI ने इसमें इस समय में लगभग 9.25 लाख करोड़ रुपीस have been infused by RBI into the banking system so that the liquidity in the banking system can be managed. And it was done through OMO by purchase of government securities. It was done by reducing the CRR. It was done by US dollar INR swap, where RBI has purchased the US dollars against the Indian rupees, which has injected durable liquidity in the market. Daily variable rate auction was introduced in January 2025 for better liquidity management in the banking sector. Drivers of liquidity: currency in circulation, Government of India cash balances, capital flows, and forex operations. Weighted average call rate remained broadly within liquidity adjustment facility corridor, softened after Feb 2025 repo rate cut. तो जो आपका weighted average call rate था, that was broadly within the LAF corridor only, but it got softened the moment you come up with the repo rate cut in the February 2025, which was much required. Next is repo rate transmission. Repo rate transmission is slower but ongoing to bank lending and deposit rates. Weighted average lending rate on fresh loans declined 2 basis point. On the outstanding, it has declined by 8 basis point. ठीक है ऋतिक, अगर आपको ये पॉइंट नहीं पता, अच्छा हुआ आपने पॉइंट आउट कर दिया, मैं बता देता हूँ। गाइस, अगर मैं अपनी मर्जी से सब बताने जाऊंगा तो बहुत कुछ है, एक एक लाइन में एक एक टर्म है जो मैं समझा सकता हूँ या समझाना चाहिए, but I will be discussing only those terms which you will be asking from me. Otherwise, I won't be able to complete this particular report ever, है ना? So no worries, I'll help you to understand this point. This point says that weighted average call rate, they have remained broadly within the liquidity adjustment facility. अब question ये है कि sir, what is this liquidity adjustment facility corridor? Then my answer to this particular question would be, see, weighted average call rate is the operating target of monetary policy in India, and it is the weighted average interest rate at which banks, they borrow and lend short-term funds, basically overnight, in the call money market. LAF corridor is repo rate and reverse repo rate or standing deposit facility rate. When weighted average call rate stays within the corridor, it means short-term markets are aligned with the RBI policies. This indicates RBI's liquidity management operations are effective. That is what I'm trying to say. ठीक है जी? WACR decide नहीं किया जाता, that is basically calculated. Bank 1, Bank 2, Bank 3, Bank 4, Bank 5, Bank 6, they are involved in short-term overnight borrowing and lending. So the weighted average rate of interest is, let's say, 6%. Repo rate is, let's say, 6.2%, 2.5%. So we'll say that it is close to the repo rate. Actually, it should be around 6.2%. That will be a scenario जब हम कहेंगे कि weighted average call rate of money market is very close to the repo rate. That means RBI is doing pretty well. अब आई बात LAF corridor की. ये जो LAF corridor है, that is basically the difference between the repo rate, or I would say it is the lower bound, that is standing deposit facility, and upper bound, that is marginal standing facility. तो इसमें अगर हम बात करें, MSF सबसे ज़्यादा जिसपे बैंक लोन लेता है, SDF is the rate at which bank provides deposits to RBI. तो ये है रेंज. यहाँ पे एक बैंक अपना पैसा RBI को दे सकता है, यहाँ पे एक बैंक अपना पैसा RBI से बोरो कर सकता है. तो इसके बीच में आपका WACR रहना चाहिए. अगर इससे आगे पीछे है तो इसका मतलब इकोनॉमी सही नहीं चल रही. और इसका जो मिडल रेंज है, दैट इज रेपो रेट. अगर आपका WACR क्लोज टू रेपो रेट है, दैट मीन्स यू आर डूइंग गुड. जो आपकी मार्केट में जिस रेट पे बोरोइंग लेंडिंग हो रही है शॉर्ट टर्म, वही आपका रेट RBI भी ऑफर कर रहा है. सो बोथ द मार्केट्स आर अलाइंड और बोथ द सिचुएशंस आर अलाइंड. ऋतिक, हरिनी, इफ इट इज क्लियर, गिव मी यस. Okay. Deposit rates slightly increased due to renewal at higher rates. That is true. अब monetary policy में एक term आई EBLR versus MCLR, external benchmark lending rate, marginal cost of fund based lending rate. So from 1st of October 2019, RBI has asked the banks to follow external benchmark lending rate, where banks should be finalizing their lending rates with respect to the four market rates, but especially in case of retail loans as well as MSME loans, it has been very clearly mentioned by RBI that the retail lending and the MSME lending should be linked to the repo rate. अब जैसे जैसे repo rate change होगा वैसे वैसे बैंक के lending rates change होंगे. अब transmission stronger है. That means most of the loans given by private banks and even the earlier loans which are given by the private banks, out of the total 85% are EBLR, but in case of public sector banks, out of the total loan 44.6% are EBLR. और जो पुराने लोन अभी भी चल रहे हैं, जो MCLR पे थे, BPLR पे थे या बेस रेट पे थे, they are still going on. They have not aligned themselves with the EBLR. So in case of transmission of EBLR is much stronger in case of private banks with respect to public sector banks. Fresh loans weighted average lending rate increased for vehicle loans, export credit, education, but it has decreased for MSMEs, infrastructure, housing and trade. Outstanding loan weighted average lending rate increased for credit cards, vehicles, export credit, agriculture and decreased for trade. तो ये क्या है? ये fresh loan जो अभी आप देंगे या दे रहे हैं, outstanding जो already आपके पास लोन आपने दिया हुआ है. अब आप सोच रहे होंगे सर जो लोन दिया है उसका लेंडिंग रेट क्यों चेंज होगा? बिकॉज ऑफ अ टर्म वी कॉल इट एज फ्लोटिंग लेंडिंग रेट. फ्लोटिंग लेंडिंग रेट मींस अ लोन गिवन, or a floating loan basically means a loan given to a borrower, and in that particular case the lending rate changes with the revision done by bank. For example, अगर RBI ने repo rate change किया तो बैंक का EBLR change होगा not only for fresh loans but it will change for the existing loans as well, जिसकी वजह से weighted average lending rates जो है they will change. Is this point clear? समझ आ गया? NBFC lending rate generally higher. Monetary transmission differs from scheduled commercial bank. Obviously, agenda क्या है? Sir, review the monetary policy framework, reassesses optimal system liquidity for effective transmission, and spatial or cross-sectional analysis of household consumption, and lastly collect sectoral credit data from housing finance companies to improve NBFC credit assessment. Conclusion की बात करूं तो inflation moderated, liquidity managed actively, repo rate cut created policy space, and going forward inflation is expected to ease towards the target, but unfortunately ऐसा हुआ नहीं. In the financial year 2025-26 we have witnessed pretty low inflation rates, even below the range, that is even below 2%. Now moving on to the next chapter, that is chapter 4, credit delivery and financial inclusion. So what is the strategic focus of RBI? Strengthening the banking services, promoting credit availability, deepening digital payments, and formulation of next national strategy for financial inclusion 2025 to 2030. 2025 to 2030. ठीक है जी, अब इसके बारे में जल्दी से बात कर लेते हैं. पहला पॉइंट, priority sector lending. We all know that this is the condition which has been set by RBI on the banks. And if I talk about the overall priority sector lending for public sector banks, private banks, foreign banks is 40%, but the overall priority sector lending achievement is 43.1%, which is more than the set targets, which is good. Kisan credit card operative accounts declined 2.7%. आपके जो operated accounts हैं against the Kisan credit card that had declined, but the outstanding credit has increased by 4.5%. Collateral free agriculture loan limit has increased from 1.6 to 2 lakhs in December 2024. तो अगर आप collateral free agriculture loan लेना चाहते हैं, जिसके लिए अगर आप gold देते हैं, that is your wish, but that is not mandatory. जो हमने एक डायरेक्शन, एक RBI का सर्कुलर पढ़ा था, उसमें ये भी पढ़ा था कि अब जो एग्रीकल्चर लोन है विदाउट कोलैटरल जो 1.6 लाख तक का था वो 2 लाख तक का दिया जा सकता है. MSME क्रेडिट आउटस्टैंडिंग क्रेडिट इंक्रीज्ड 14.8% ऑन ईयर बेसिस. आई होप यू रिमेंबर हमने कुछ रिविजन्स में बात की थी. प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर लेंडिंग गाइडलाइंस हैव बीन रिवाइज्ड. इवन हमने ये भी बात की थी कि नाउ फॉर अर्बन कोऑपरेटिव बैंक इट इज 60%, फॉर small finance bank it has also reduced to 60%. Even we have talked about the revised limits. Housing loan के लिए limits revise हुई थी, education loan के लिए limits revise हुई थी, for limits have been revised for renewable energy, sector limits have been revised for social sector. याद होगा, I have taken up this session. If you have not attended that session, then I would request you go back and check my finance current affairs PDF. वहां पर आपको मिल जाएगा. आउटस्टैंडिंग क्रेडिट का मतलब है जो पैसा अभी वापस आना है. मान लो आपने लोन 10,000 का दिया, उसमें से 9,000 वापस आ गए, तो आपका जो आउटस्टैंडिंग क्रेडिट है दैट इज 9,000, जबकि आपका टोटल लोन था 10,000 का, आउटस्टैंडिंग इज 9,000. Is it clear, Gaurav? Moving on to the next point. Financial inclusion initiatives. Financial inclusion initiative में we have a term that is known as EDDPE, that is expanding and deepening of digital payment ecosystem. So expanding and deepening the digital, expanding and deepening of digital payment ecosystem. टारगेट क्या था कि सर टारगेट वाज 50% ऑफ द इंडियन डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स शुड अचीव 100% लेवल ऑफ एक्सपेंडिंग एंड डीपनिंग ऑफ डिजिटल पेमेंट इकोसिस्टम. बट सरप्राइजिंगली 100% कवरेज इन 514 डिस्ट्रिक्ट विच इज ग्रेटर देन 60% नेशन वाइड. टारगेट क्या था 50%. इसे इंप्लीमेंट किया अगस्त 23 में, और अगस्त 23 में कहा गया इट विल बी इंप्लीमेंटेड फॉर द एंटायर कंट्री. कुछ डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स हैं, some of the districts of some of the states which are not included. Overall most of the districts are included. टारगेट था कि 50% डिस्ट्रिक्ट में 100% कवरेज होना चाहिए, बट we have overachieved the target where 60% or more than 60% districts have witnessed more than 100%, have witnessed 100% of the coverage. Lead bank scheme review underway to enhance credit access and service quality. तो lead banks इंडिया में 12 public sector banks, 2 private banks are the lead banks. Universal village access achieved 99.99%. Any idea, guys? What is this universal village access? Any idea? Universal village access का मतलब है ensuring that all villages they have all weather one second. ठीक है, अगर हम यूनिवर्सल विलेज एक्सेस की बात करें तो यूनिवर्सल विलेज एक्सेस इज अ जनरल टर्म जो ये कहता है कि ensuring all villages have all weather roads connectivity. ब्रॉडर यूज में यूनिवर्सल एक्सेस टू लिक्विडिटी, ड्रिंकिंग वाटर, सैनिटेशन. डिजिटल एक्सेस में यूनिवर्सल ब्रॉडबैंड, मोबाइल कनेक्टिविटी इन द विलेजेस, लिंक्ड टू प्रोग्राम्स इन भारत नेट, एम टू कनेक्ट एवरी ग्राम पंचायत विद ऑप्टिकल फाइबर. और फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन में यूनिवर्सल एक्सेस टू द बैंकिंग एंड फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज. बट इफ वी dig down or if we dig deep in this, it talks about in this manner that whenever we talk about the term that is universal village access, so universal village access basically talks about the availability of banking branch. It basically talks about क्या बोल रहा था मैं, अच्छा, it basically talks about the availability it basically talks about the availability of bank branches within the 5 kilometers of radius. अगर आपके 5 kilometer of radius में आपके पास एक बैंक ब्रांच है, that means universal village access है, and it has achieved 99.99% of identified villages and hamlets. तो ये जो target है, it has been achieved, and it has been achieved to a value of 90. This has been achieved to a value of 99.9%. ठीक है जी, क्लियर हो गया पॉइंट, समझ आ गया आई गेस. इसमें और कोई डाउट नहीं होगा. इफ यू स्टिल हैव एनी डाउट यू मे आस्क प्लीज. तो यूनिवर्सल विलेज एक्सेस इज अ जनरल टर्म. यूनिवर्सल विलेज एक्सेस इज अ जनरल टर्म, लेकिन जब इसको हम फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बात करते हैं, दैट इज बेसिकली द अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ बैंकिंग सर्विसेज विद इन दी 5 kilometer square. So we say that providing banking access to every village within 5 kilometer radius of 500 households in hilly areas is one of the milestone of NFSI 2019-2024, which has been fully achieved. It has been fully achieved in 27 states as well as 8 districts, and it is 99.99% of the identified villages across the country have been covered. 99.99% of the villages across the country have been covered. Clear? Next is financial inclusion index grew 6.8% year on year to 64.2%, 64.2 score. बट इसका जो लेटेस्ट डेटा है वो भी हम डिस्कस कर चुके हैं. फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन प्लान, बेसिक सेविंग बैंक डिपॉजिट अकाउंट balances have increased within 11.9% year on year growth. Within 11.9% of year on year growth. ठीक है जी. Moving on to the next, financial literacy. Center for Financial Literacy scaled to 2421. Center for Financial Literacy or Financial Literacy Centers, they conduct literacy camps, linkages for bank accounts, insurance and pensions. Financial Literacy Week 2025 with a theme Financial Literacy, Women's Poverty, Women's Prosperity. This is something which you need to remember. RBI 90 quiz, nationwide quiz for undergraduate, 1.58 lakh students participated. Again, it is a initiative towards financial inclusion. Financial literacy activities have been conducted by these financial literacy centers, or we call them as centers for financial literacy. Then key challenges, MSME, faster loan processing. So this is a key challenge for MSME. There has been a target set that faster loan processing should be done where the turnaround time should be 14 days for loans up to 25 lakhs. मतलब ये है कि अगर आपका लोन 25 लाख से कम है और आपने आज एप्लीकेशन दी तो 14 दिन के अंदर अंदर या तो लोन अप्रूव हो जाएगा या फिर अगर कैंसिल होना है या रिजेक्ट होना है तो रिजेक्शन का आपको इन्फॉर्मेशन मिल जाएगा. दिस इज द चैलेंज which is going to be assessed or which is going to be addressed. Credit proposal tracking, cluster financing guidance will be done. Enhancing digital payment coverage and deepening financial literacy has been done, ensuring equitable credit allocation to the priority sector. So these were the challenges which has been addressed in the current financial year. Review and refine financial inclusion index, strengthen the MSME outreach and inclusion, achieve 100% coverage in 80% districts under expanding and deepening of digital payment ecosystem, continue focus on deepening financial inclusion and priority sector. Clear हो गई बात? So this is about your 4th chapter. Now, before starting with the 5th chapter, guys, I believe कि हम यहाँ रुक जाते हैं. That is more appropriate for us. क्योंकि मुझे तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, मैं तो सब लिख कर लाया हूँ, मैं तो आपके लिए पढ़ दूंगा, बट आई वॉन्ट कि आपको थोड़ा टाइम मिल जाए. सो टेक योर टाइम. Take your time. We will be moving ahead with the next chapter in the next class, and the next class will be on Sunday. I'll ask my team to schedule that class right away ताकि आपको इस बार पहली बार की तरह वेट ना करना पड़े. आपकी जो क्लास है वो संडे को स्केड्यूल हो जाए. तो संडे को हमारे पास जो चैप्टर है दैट विल बी फाइनेंशियल मार्केट. मैं दिखा देता हूँ. दैट विल बी फाइनेंशियल मार्केट एंड फॉरेन एक्सचेंज मैनेजमेंट. देन वी हैव रेगुलेशन, सुपरविजन एंड फाइनेंशियल स्टेबिलिटी. इसके अलावा जो और हमारे पास इम्पॉर्टेंट चैप्टर्स बचे हैं जिस पे ज़्यादा समय नहीं लगेगा, वी विल टेक अराउंड एन आवर और सो. दैट इज पब्लिक डेट मैनेजमेंट, करेंसी मैनेजमेंट, पेमेंट एंड सेटलमेंट सिस्टम एंड इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी. बहुत छोटे छोटे चैप्टर है. कम्युनिकेशन, इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन, रिसर्च एंड स्टार्ट्स, बहुत ब्रॉड लेवल पे बात करेंगे. गवर्नेंस के बारे में बहुत ही ब्रॉड लेवल पे बात करेंगे. उसके बाद मैं आपको डेटा दे दूंगा फॉर बैलेंस शीट, इनकम स्टेटमेंट ऑफ RBI फाइनेंशियल ईयर 2025-26 विच इज मोर देन सफिशिएंट फॉर यू. ठीक है जी. अब आपको करना क्या है, आपको बस एक ही काम करना है. इस सेशन के बाद इस सेशन की PDF आप डाउनलोड कर लीजिएगा मेरे टेलीग्राम चैनल से और उसे पढ़ लीजिएगा और कमेंट सेक्शन में फीडबैक ज़रूर दीजिएगा और बताइएगा कि और क्या मैं चेंजेस या एड ऑन करूं फॉर रेस्ट ऑफ द अपकमिंग एनुअल रिपोर्ट सेशंस. तो आने वाले जो एनुअल रिपोर्ट सेशंस हैं उनमें क्या क्या आपके सजेशंस हैं, क्या क्या आपके चीज़ें हैं जो आप चाहते हैं कि मैं आपके लिए इंक्लूड करूं. डू इन्फॉर्म मी. मैं सारे के सारे चैप्टर्स को PDF में इंक्लूड करूंगा ही ऑब्वियसली. तो आज पार्ट 1 पार्ट 2 की पीडीएफ मिल जाएगी, देन यू विल गेट दी पीडीएफ ऑफ पार्ट 3 एंड आई विल ट्राई माय लेवल बेस्ट कि पार्ट 3 should be the last part of this particular annual report. Thank you so much for joining, guys. We'll catch you in the upcoming sessions to go. Don't forget to hit the like button before leaving and do share the link of this session with your friends and do share your feedbacks in the comment section once the class is done. If you have any doubt, do write down your doubt in the comment section below. I will be catering all your doubts on Sunday, most probably same time. Thank you so much. Good luck.